Sometimes, the greatest miracles begin on the coldest days, like the moment a single father found 4 orphaned girls shivering beside a train, and unknowingly opened the door to a secret that would change all their lives. If stories of hope, healing, and unexpected love speak to your heart, consider subscribing. You won't want to miss what unfolds next. Now let me tell you what really happened on that snow-covered platform. Snow Pine, Wyoming, the kind of place where time forgot to hurry. The wind screamed that night, not a whispering gust, but a full-throated howl that clawed at windows and snapped old trees in half. It was the kind of storm that made the town of Snowpine disappear behind a curtain of white, where even memories seemed to freeze. Cal Bennett pulled his coat tighter around his broad shoulders, his breath sharp in the cold air as he loaded the last bag of coal into the town's supply shed near the train station. The snow reached his knees, and each step felt like moving through wet cement. He'd long ago stopped caring. What else was there after all? At 43, Cal lived in a cabin 2 miles outside town, alone. No family, no visitors, just the old dog that had died 2 winters back and a broken guitar he never played anymore. He was halfway to his truck when he heard it cry. High-pitched, sharp, then another. Not a fox, not the wind. Children. Cal's heart skipped. He spun around, scanning the train platform, where the 510 had pulled out only 10 minutes earlier, leaving behind nothing but steam and footprints. He dropped the bag and ran. The cries came from the shadows near the side of the freight car that hadn't been used in years, a rusted hulk chained off from the main line. Cal yanked open the gate and saw them. 4 little girls. They stood huddled together in the snow, dressed in thin brown dresses and white kerchiefs, eyes wide with shock. One was clutching a piece of paper. Another had no shoes. Dear God, Cal breathed. The oldest, maybe 10, stepped forward. Her lips trembled, but her voice didn't. "Are you the station master?" he said softly. "But I'm gonna help you." She nodded once. No tears, just frostbitten bravery. He peeled off his coat and dropped to his knees, wrapping it around the smallest girl first, barely more than a toddler. The second oldest tried to help her fingers shaking as she fumbled with a frayed scarf. The oldest girl shoved the piece of paper into his hand. Cal opened it with stiff fingers. The writing was smudged, rushed, fading from moisture. If someone finds them, please don't send them back. Let them live. Let them love. Let them be free. There was no signature. Cal didn't hesitate. He scooped up the smallest girl, gesturing for the others to follow. "Come on. We can't stay out here. You'll freeze." He got them into the truck, cranked the heater to full, and pushed the engine harder than he had in years. No one spoke on the drive. The oldest girl held the youngest tight in her lap, while the others sat quietly, eyes darting to Cal, to the snow, to each other. Back at his cabin, Cal brought them in one by one, setting blankets by the fire and pulling warm socks from an old chest. He boiled water, made soup, sat across from them on the floor. Names, he asked gently. The oldest finally spoke. "I'm Rosie. This is Lila June. And Hazel." Hazel blinked at him with wide owl-like eyes. She couldn't be more than 6. "How long were you out there?" Rosie hesitated. 2 days, since we got off the train." Cal felt something tighten in his chest. "You got off. Alone." "We were told to wait. Mama said someone kind would find us." Mama Rosie swallowed. "She said she'd find us again. But she had to disappear." Cal rubbed his temple. This wasn't just abandonment. This was something more. Planned. Desperate. And somehow these girls had survived 2 nights in a freight car in the middle of a blizzard. That alone was a miracle. "What do you eat?" he asked, still stunned. "We had crackers," June said. and Rosie made us drink snow slowly, not too fast. Rosie looked down. Lila found a box of matches. We lit one at night just to see each other's faces. Cal had no words. They were survivors, all of them, and whatever storm had brought them here, it hadn't broken them. Yet. That night he sat alone in his kitchen as the fire cracked softly in the living room. The girls were asleep on the pull-out sofa, curled together like fox pups. He poured himself a cup of strong tea, hands shaking. He hadn't saved them. They had saved each other. And somehow, they had saved him too. Cal woke at first light to the scent of something burning. It took a few disoriented seconds for his brain to register he hadn't cooked anything. The girls. He bolted from bed, heart pounding, half expecting to find the cabin ablaze. But when he reached the small kitchen, he stopped cold. There stood Rosie, standing on an overturned bucket, clutching a wooden spoon and stirring a pot of oatmeal over the wood stove. Her hair was tied back with a fraying ribbon, and she had the focused expression of someone twice her age. "I tried," she said before he could speak. "I didn't mean to burn it." Cal blinked. "You made breakfast." She nodded, her voice steady. "You helped us. We wanted to help you back." Lila and June sat quietly at the table, still wrapped in the blankets Cal had given them the night before. Hazel was curled beside the hearth, humming softly to herself and playing with an empty teacup like it was a musical instrument. It hit him. Then this was no accident of fate. These girls were already a family, tight, rooted in each other, and now somehow he'd become part of the circle. "You didn't have to," Cal said, stepping in. "You should be resting." "We're not babies," Lila chimed in. "We know how to survive. I can sew," June added proudly. "And Rosie can do numbers. She helped Mama keep track of groceries. I helped her write." Cal slowly sat down at the table. It was a rough pine thing, handmade and scarred with time. He stared at the girls, now spooning burnt oatmeal into tin bowls, like it was a royal feast. "You don't have to prove anything to me," he said quietly. Rosie tilted her head. "People always made us prove we weren't a problem." Cal didn't know how to answer that. He only knew what he felt: shame for thinking of them as a burden even for a moment, and awe because they weren't just surviving. They were trying to belong. After breakfast, Cal took them outside to fetch more wood. The wind had died down, but the cold bit hard. He handed each girl a small bundle of firewood and was surprised to find they carried it with ease. No complaining, no pouting, just quiet competence. Rosie looked around the clearing then at the old barn beside the cabin. "Is that yours too?" "Used to be," Cal said. "It collapsed some years back. I could draw you a plan to fix it," she said, completely serious. "If we had wood. I remember how Mama measured things." He blinked at her. "You know how to draw plans?" She nodded. "We used to help her fix things. She made us learn." Later that afternoon, while the younger girls napped, Cal gave Rosie a pencil and an old notepad. She sketched for nearly an hour, tongue between her teeth. When she handed it to him, his breath caught. It wasn't just childish lines and scribbles. It was a scaled floor plan with labels, measurements, a suggestion to reroute the drainage from the back wall to avoid future flooding. It was something a contractor might have charged him $1,000 to do. "This is incredible," he said. Rosie shrugged. "Mama said, if we were going to have to move a lot, we should know how to make a place feel like home." That night, the cabin was full of soft noises. Hazel's rhythmic hums, the crackle of firewood, June's quiet reading aloud of a children's book Cal had long forgotten he owned. Cal sat by the stove with a mug of weak coffee listening. He remembered what silence used to sound like here. Now it was different. Warmer. He noticed it when Rosie gently tucked Hazel under an extra quilt, murmuring something in her ear. When Lila organized their borrowed socks into neat pairs and placed them by the fire to warm. When June asked if she could sweep the floor before bed so it doesn't feel like a stranger's place, they weren't guests anymore. But Cal wasn't ready to admit that. The next morning, Cal drove into town. He walked into the general store and filled a cart with food boots, coats, and hygiene supplies. Old Mr. Daly at the counter raised a bushy eyebrow. Expecting company, Cal hesitated. Kind of. You finally find yourself something like that. The old man chuckled. About damn time. When Cal returned, the cabin smelled like apples and cinnamon. I found the spice rack. June grinned. The jar was old, but I think it's still good. Rosie handed him a mug of warm cider. We boiled snow for it. He took a sip. It was the best thing he'd tasted in years. That evening, the girls sat around the table and asked him for a story. Not a fairy tale, a real one. About him. He hadn't told that kind of story in a long time. He told them about the mountains, about how he used to fix trails and build roads for small towns, how he loved the quiet of the forest and the creak of old bridges under his boots, how he once built a rope swing over a frozen river and jumped before the ice broke. They laughed wide-eyed. Then came the question he wasn't ready for. "Why are you alone?" Hazel asked. The room grew quiet. Cal looked at the fire. "I wasn't always." A pause. "But life doesn't always go the way you planned." Rosie nodded like she understood more than she should. "We didn't plan to end up here either," she said. Cal smiled gently. "Maybe we all landed in the right place anyway." 3 days passed, and the snow outside began to melt in patches. Cal shoveled a path from the cabin to the old tool shed, not because he needed to, but because it felt like something a man with a family might do. Inside the cabin, life had found a rhythm. It was no longer quiet in the same way. It was gentle now, filled with the sound of giggles, soft footsteps on the wood floor, the clatter of tin bowls, and the occasional humming of a tune no one had taught. On the 4th morning, Cal rose to find Rosie already at the table again, this time not with breakfast, but with a diagram. Her hair still damp from washing, she laid out a paper map of the old barn beside the house. "I went outside when you were sleeping," she said. "It's mostly beams and half a wall, but the rest can be salvaged. We could use the south corner as a greenhouse if we cover the gaps with plastic." Cal stared at the drawing. "Where'd you learn all this Mama taught us?" She said, "Knowing how to build means you can never be truly poor." Cal nodded more to himself than to her. That line, it wasn't something a child should understand so deeply. But Rosie did. Later that day, June came into the room carrying Cal's old toolbox, struggling a little with the weight. "What's this for?" he asked. "I want to fix the step outside. It's loose." "You know how to fix a step," she beamed. "I watched Mama do it twice, and I've been reading the Home Basics book on your shelf." Cal raised an eyebrow. "That thing's older than this cabin." "It still makes sense," she replied proudly. Outside, Cal watched as June took careful measurements, using a ruler she made out of a broken yardstick. She examined the warped wood, turned the screws methodically, and shimmed the weak spot with a sliver of bark. It wasn't perfect, but it held. When she tested it with her foot, it didn't creak. Not once. Cal let out a low whistle. "That's solid." June grinned, flushed with accomplishment. "I thought so too." Meanwhile, Lila had claimed the corner of the living room as her sewing station. Using torn bed sheets and mismatched socks, she fashioned mittens for Hazel and a soft scarf for Rosie. She worked with focus and quiet joy, her small fingers nimble, her brow furrowed in concentration. One evening, Cal found her stitching an old tea towel into a makeshift curtain for the bathroom. "I figured you'd want privacy," she said softly, not looking up. Cal crouched beside her. "Thank you, Lila. That means more than you know." And then there was Hazel. The youngest, often silent, never far from Rosie's side, had begun to speak more in song than in words. She tapped cups together in rhythmic patterns. She hummed as she stirred soup. When wind blew through the cracks in the walls, she harmonized with it. One afternoon, Cal returned from chopping wood and froze at the door. Inside, Hazel sat with a row of mismatched glass jars filled with different amounts of water. She tapped them with a spoon, creating a haunting melodic chime that stopped Cal in his tracks. She looked up, blinking. "Do you like it?" He nodded slowly. "What is it?" "A lullaby," she whispered. "The one Mama used to hum when she was sad." Cal sat down beside her. "Can you teach it to me?" Hazel smiled. "Only if you promise not to cry." He didn't, but only barely. That night, he sat by the fire while the girls played together on the rug. In the flickering light, he saw something he hadn't noticed before, how much they had changed the cabin. The table had new placemats Lila had sewn from old cloth. The shelf had books, organized by June, sorted by thickness and topic. Rosie had pinned drawings and project sketches beside the front door. Even Hazel had lined up pine cones on the windowsill like tiny guardians. The house was still old, still weather-beaten, still too cold in the morning and too drafty at night. But it was no longer silent, or sad, or empty. It was becoming a home. Cal's neighbor Rachel Kerrigan stopped by the next morning with eggs. She was a retired schoolteacher and one of the only people Cal hadn't managed to push away over the years. "I heard you've got company," she said, arching a brow as she handed over the carton. Something like that, Cal admitted. When Rosie and June came out to say, "Thank you," Rachel's face softened instantly. "They're polite," she said after the girls went back inside. "And smarter than half the boys I taught." Cal looked at her. "You think I'm crazy," Rachel shook her head. "No, I think this might be the best thing that's ever happened to you." Cal paused, then said, "They've got something in them, each one, like the world never told them no, like they still believe they can fix it." Rachel smiled. "Let them keep believing that, Cal. Maybe they're right." That night, as snow fell again outside, Rosie came to him with a question. "Do you want us to stay?" Cal opened his mouth, then closed it again. He wasn't sure how to answer. Could he promise something like that? But then Hazel climbed onto his lap and handed him a paper heart she'd made. June sat beside him with a book she wanted him to read aloud. Lila leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't know if I deserve this," he whispered. Rosie looked at him. "But maybe. This is exactly where we're meant to be." Cal hadn't gone into the attic in nearly 5 years. He'd kept the trapdoor latched, pretending it didn't exist, like the grief sealed inside it would disappear if he didn't open the hatch. But Rosie had asked for extra blankets, and he knew the best ones were up there, folded in a cedar chest untouched since the winter his life unraveled. He climbed the ladder slowly that morning, the wood groaning under his weight. The air grew colder with each rung, and by the time his head cleared the floorboards, he was breathing dust and memory. The light bulb flickered once when he pulled the chain. Boxes sat like sleeping ghosts, labeled in his late wife's careful handwriting. Thanksgiving. Baby clothes. Music. His hand trembled as he unlatched the cedar chest. Inside lay a folded wool blanket and a faded baby sweater, hand-knit in cream yarn with a tiny acorn button. He sat back on his heels, staring at it. His son would have been 7 now. Cal didn't talk about the avalanche. No one in Snowpine did not, because they didn't care, but because there weren't words big enough to hold that kind of silence. His wife May had been pregnant when it happened. They were hiking early that season, scouting sites for a trail restoration project. Cal remembered the sharp blue sky, the crisp air, the way May had laughed when the wind tangled her hair. The snow came fast, roaring like a freight train, erasing color and breath and sound. They never found her. Only the blue mitten she'd sewn for their unborn baby. After that, Cal had left his work, his music, and most of the world behind. The mountains that once gave him purpose had turned on him. And the cabin, it became a monument to what he couldn't save. That night he laid the baby sweater on the kitchen table. Hazel wandered in, rubbing her eyes. "What's that?" she asked, climbing into his lap. "A memory," he said softly. She touched the acorn button with one tiny finger. "Was it yours?" "No, it was someone I was supposed to meet." He paused. "But I didn't get the chance." Hazel didn't ask more. She only leaned her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat like it had answers. In the days that followed, something in Cal shifted. He began to repair the broken porch steps without waiting to be asked. He brought out his guitar, dusty strings, rusted, but still humming with life, and began restringing it in the evenings as the girls read or sewed. He didn't play yet, but he tuned it. That was a beginning. On the 6th day, he brought home planks and nails from the hardware store. "Are we fixing the barn?" Rosie asked, eyes lighting up. "Not yet," he said. "We're starting smaller." He handed her a hammer and June a paintbrush. Together they cleared a corner of the yard and began building a tree platform, not quite a treehouse, but a place where the girls could sit above the world and feel like queens. They worked until their hands were blistered and cheeks flushed. Lila painted vines around the posts. Hazel lined the edges with polished stones she'd collected from under the snow. Cal stood back one evening and looked at the platform glowing in the sunset, with the girls laughing atop it, hair wild in the wind. He felt something like hope, but change he knew never came without cost. Late one night, a pickup pulled into his driveway. Rachel Kerrigan stepped out, coat buttoned tight, brows drawn. "There's been a call," she said. "Sheriff says someone from out of state asked about 4 missing girls. Said they might have gotten on a train headed north." Cal stiffened. "They didn't leave names," Rachel continued. "Didn't claim them outright. Just asked questions." He looked past her toward the house where the soft glow of candlelight flickered behind curtains. June had made those curtains. Rosie had built the shelf beside them. This wasn't just shelter anymore. This was home. After Rachel left, Cal sat outside alone, wrapped in an old quilt. The stars blinked cold and distant overhead. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if someone would come knocking. He only knew one thing: he wasn't going to lose them without a fight. The next morning, the girls found him oiling the hinges on the cabin door. "Is someone coming?" Rosie asked quietly. "Maybe," he said. "Will they take us away?" He paused, then knelt to her level. "I don't have papers, or titles, or fancy words," he said. "But I have a home, and I have you." He looked up at all 4 of them. "And that means I'm not alone anymore. So no, I won't let them." Rosie nodded, tears in her eyes. "Then we won't go." June stepped forward. "Even if they try, even then." Hazel reached for his hand. Even forever, Cal smiled through the sting in his throat. Especially forever. The ridge above the cabin caught the last blush of winter sun like a crown. From the clearing near the barn, ruins you could see all the way to the tree line, miles of snow-laced silence, broken only by wind and the slow creak of pine boughs. That was where Rosie first saw her. A woman standing still at the edge of the ridge, wrapped in a long coat hood pulled low, watching the cabin. Rosie didn't say anything for a while. She only noticed the way the woman came at the same time each evening, always standing in the same place, never stepping forward, never turning back until twilight swallowed the trees. On the 3rd day, she told Cal. "She's not dangerous," Rosie said, "but she's waiting." Cal followed her to the edge of the clearing. The woman wasn't there that day, only boot prints in the snow, small, precise, facing downhill. Could be someone from the reservation trail, he muttered, though his gut knew better. Hazel had her own theory. I think she's our angel. June disagreed. She's a spy. I think she's cold, Lila added practically. Maybe she wants soup. Cal tried to laugh it off, but the prince haunted him. He didn't like being watched. He'd built his life in layers' quiet distance boundaries, and now someone was peeling those layers back. That night, he left the porch light on, just in case. The next evening, the woman came again. Cal saw her first this time. From the kitchen window, just a glimpse through the trees, motionless, backlit by gold light. He opened the door, stepped outside. "Hey," he called, voice low but firm. "You need something." She didn't answer. After a moment, she turned, disappearing into the woods with practiced ease. Rosie tugged his sleeve later. "She's not afraid of you." Cal frowned. "She should be." "No," Rosie said simply. "She knows you wouldn't hurt her." On the 5th day, a package appeared on the porch, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. No name, no note. Inside were 4 perfectly knit wool hats, each child's name sewn inside in neat, hand-stitched letters. Alongside them was a small jar of clover honey and a weathered leather-bound copy of Little Women. The girls erupted in delighted squeals. Lila hugged her hat to her chest. Hazel put hers on backward and danced in circles. Cal said nothing. He only held the book and stared at the inscription inside the cover. For the day they know where they belong. No signature. That night he didn't sleep. He sat near the fire guitar across his lap, fingers motionless on the strings. The woman had known their names, their sizes, their hearts. But more than that, she cared in a way that didn't feel distant. It felt personal, intimate, familiar. It scared him more than he expected. On the 7th day, Cal saw her again, this time closer. She stood halfway down the ridge now, just beyond the broken fence. He stepped outside, slow, deliberate. Didn't call out, just waited. The woman turned slightly but didn't flee. He took a step forward. She took one back, another step, another retreat. And then she paused, pulled something from her coat and knelt. When she stood again, she was gone into the trees before he reached her. Where she had knelt was a canvas bag. Inside canned peaches, fresh socks, medical supplies, and a letter. He took it to the porch and sat. The envelope was blank. The handwriting was smooth, feminine, measured. "I'm not ready to face them yet. I know how that sounds, cowardly. But I've watched them laugh again. I've seen them sleep without fear. I hear Hazel humming, and it breaks me and heals me in the same breath. I know who you are, Mr. Bennett, and I trust you. Please don't ask them to forgive me until I can forgive myself." Cal folded the letter and stared out at the empty trees. The wind carried no answers. The girls never asked who left the gifts. Perhaps they didn't want to break the spell. But Rosie, ever perceptive, brought Cal a second drawing the next morning. It was a picture of a woman in a long coat, standing just beyond a cabin window. The children were inside, smiling. The woman was not. Rosie handed him the paper and said, "I think she misses us." Cal didn't answer, because deep down he already knew the truth. He'd known since the first night the woman stepped into his dreams. She wasn't a stranger. She was their mother. That evening, Cal took the girls on a walk down to the riverbed. They skipped rocks, giggled over snow angels, shared one of Hazel's pine cone stories. When the stars appeared and the cold crept in, they turned for home. As they approached the cabin, Rosie tugged at his sleeve. She pointed silently toward the ridge. Cal looked up. The woman stood there, hands clasped, not moving, only watching. Rosie lifted her hand and waved. The woman didn't wave back, but she didn't walk away either. Later, when the girls had gone to sleep, Cal lit a lantern and placed it on the porch. Then he stood on the steps facing the ridge and said softly, "You don't have to be a ghost. They're not waiting to punish you. They're waiting to love you." And then he went inside, closed the door quietly behind him. But he left the light burning all night. By the time March melted into April, the snow had surrendered to soft earth and early shoots of green. The mountains were still capped in white, but the cabin had begun to breathe again. Cal stood by the kitchen window one morning, watching Hazel balance a pine cone on the fence post like it was sacred. Lila chased a runaway sock in the wind. Rosie sat cross-legged in the dirt, sketching blueprints for a chicken coop they didn't yet have chickens for. And June, she was halfway up a ladder painting the window frame a bright sunflower yellow. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen so much color in his life. He poured 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Rachel Kerrigan, who had come over again with garden seeds and gossip. "You planning to keep all 4?" she asked casually, watching the girls through the glass. Cal hesitated, then said, "They're not staying with me." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm staying with them." That day marked the beginning of the spring project. That's what Rosie called it. Capitalized, underlined with a checklist as long as Cal's arm. At the top of the list, fix the leaky roof sand, the warped floorboards, and build a proper pantry. Rosie drafted the tasks, June kept track of inventory, Lila repaired every torn curtain and cushion, and Hazel decorated every inch of progress with acorns, beads, and hand-colored notes that read things like, "Don't give up. This wall loves you." Cal worked like he hadn't in years, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His hands, once stiff from neglect, grew strong again. He remembered the rhythm of the hammer, the weight of a level, the smell of freshly cut pine. For the first time since May's death, he looked forward to waking up. The girls insisted on contributing. They saved scraps of fabric to create homemade insulation for the windows. June managed to trade a basket of hand-sewn pot holders at the general store for a gallon of paint and 3 nails. "We're entrepreneurs now," she declared with pride. Rosie taught the others how to stretch a grocery budget. Lila mended an old jacket of Cal's with floral patches no man should have worn, but he did gladly. Hazel composed a song called "The Floorboard Waltz," which she sang while they scrubbed, danced, and hammered. It became their anthem. In late April, Rachel returned with another surprise: 3 battered chairs, a box of dishes, and a rusty cast-iron skillet that could outlive them all. "She's got neighbors donating?" Rachel grinned. "I think Snow Pines figured out who those girls belong to." Cal tried to keep the emotion from his face. "You mean the man who lived alone and never waved?" Rachel smiled. "Now you're the man with a painted porch and 4 daughters who sell potholders." One morning, Rosie appeared with a folded envelope in her hand. She placed it on the kitchen table like it might catch fire if anyone breathed too hard. "It's from her," she said simply. Cal sat down and opened it. I saw the window frame. Yellow was her favorite color. "I've watched them grow stronger, kinder. You've built something I was too broken to even imagine. I left them because I was told I was unfit, that no one would let me keep them. So I ran, and then I watched them find someone better than me. I'm not ready to walk up those steps yet. But every board you fix, every curtain they sew, every song Hazel hums, brings me closer." There was no name, just a pressed violet between the folds. That night, Rosie asked a question Cal didn't see coming. "Did you ever want to have kids?" The fire cracked behind him. "I did," he said softly. "Once. What happened, I lost someone, and the idea of a family felt like a door that closed." Rosie leaned her head on his shoulder. "We're not the family you planned." "No," he said. "You're better." The next morning, the girls woke early to decorate the front yard. Hazel gathered pine branches and strung them into a garland. June painted wooden signs that read, "Welcome home, and this house has love in it." Lila placed a plate of sugar cookies by the door. "What's all this for?" Cal asked. Rosie looked at him with a quiet smile. "In case she comes." Cal didn't ask who she was. He didn't need to. That evening they held their first dinner around the big table. Everyone had a chair. Everyone had a job. Rosie carved the roast chicken. June said grace. Lila passed the plates. Hazel led a toast with grape juice. "To the house," she said, "and the man who built it back up." Cal choked on his drink and laughed. When the meal was done, he took a walk alone around the yard. The sky was soft with stars. The ridge was quiet. No one stood watching this time. But the porch lantern burned anyway, just in case. The envelope was cream-colored, thick and stamped with a gold insignia. It arrived in early May, tucked among seed catalogs and utility bills at the general store. Rachel Kerrigan spotted it. First, turned it over twice in her hands and frowned. No return address. But it was addressed clearly and precisely to Mr. Cal Bennett, caretaker of Rosie, June, Lila, and Hazel. Rachel delivered it herself, riding the mile-long gravel road with the envelope tucked in her coat. She didn't knock when she arrived. She walked straight into the yard where Cal was sanding the railing on the porch. "You'd better read this somewhere private," she said. Then she left him standing there, sawdust in his hair's heart already pounding. Inside the cabin, the girls were in the middle of baking an experimental carrot cake. Hazel wore a chef's apron made from an old pillowcase. Rosie was reciting measurements, like a general commanding troops. Cal quietly slipped into the bedroom and shut the door behind him. He sat on the edge of the bed, exhaled hard, and opened the envelope. The letter inside was printed on heavy stationery, the ink dark and sharp. "To whom it may concern, this correspondence is made in good faith regarding the welfare of 4 minor children, Rose Juniper, Liliana, and Hazel Delacour. An anonymous inquiry placed through a private firm has confirmed that they were last seen disembarking from the South Line train near Snowpine, Wyoming. We write to inquire about their condition and current caretaking arrangements. As legal representatives of the Delacour Family Trust, we are obliged to pursue custody welfare verification or legal guardianship of said minors. Please respond at your earliest convenience." Sincerely, Abernathy and Lyons, attorneys at Law Cal, stared at the words, reading them twice, then a third time. Delacour. He'd heard that name before, years ago in newspapers, and overheard conversations. The Delacour estate, based in Connecticut, was old money, generational. Their name had been carved into universities, hospitals, orchestras. Their scandals had always been hidden well buried under press releases and donations. He folded the letter slowly like it might detonate. That night, he couldn't sleep. He paced the floor, checked the locks, lit the fire, let it die, then lit it again. He thought about Rosie teaching Hazel to read by the fireplace, about June holding his hand at the clinic, about Lila humming while she sewed patches onto his flannel shirts, about Hazel whispering songs in her sleep. They weren't just in his life. They were his life. He pulled the letter from his coat pocket, read it one more time. And that's when he noticed something he'd missed: the children's full names. Rose Delacour, Juniper Delacour, Liliana Delacour, Hazel Delacour. Not aliases, not code. Their real names. The girls had never once told him, but someone had. The next morning, he found Rosie at the table writing a list of vegetables they could plant before June. He sat across from her, unfolded the letter, and laid it on the wood between them. Her eyes scanned it quickly. She didn't flinch. "I figured it would come," she said. Cal blinked. You knew Rosie nodded slowly. "Mama said she came from people who only cared about their name. She didn't want us to grow up like that. So she gave us other names. shorter ones. Delacour, he said, trying the word in his mouth. It tasted like steel and porcelain. She said if anyone found us, it would be the lawyers first. Are they coming? I don't know. Do you want them to? Rosie looked down. I don't want anything that takes us away from here. Cal reached across the table, placed his hand over hers. No one's taking you anywhere. That day, Cal drove into town and walked straight into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Reuben Sutter was an old friend of his father's, weathered, honest, not fond of outside interference. Someone's looking for the girls, Cal said. And I think they've got money behind them. Sutter studied the letter. You want me to stall this? I want to know my rights. What happens if someone shows up with a badge or a court order? The sheriff leaned back. You've taken them in, fed them, sheltered them. That matters. But legally, no paperwork, no formal guardianship. It's a gray area. Cal's stomach turned. There's a woman, he said. Their mother. She's alive. Sutter raised a brow. You sure she's been here? Watching. Leaving things. Letters. Sutter sighed. Then we'd better find a way to get her on record. If she confirms you're their guardian of choice, we might have a fighting chance. That night, Cal stood alone on the porch again, staring up at the ridge. He didn't expect her to come. But she did. Just after sunset, like always. This time closer. No hood. No coat pulled tight. Her hair caught the light auburn streaks, glinting gold. He stepped forward. So it's true, he said. She didn't deny it. Why didn't you tell me, he asked. I didn't want them to know what I ran from. But now it's found them. She nodded, pain etched in her face. I'm sorry. I'm not the one you need to say that to. She looked toward the cabin where silhouettes moved behind glowing windows. The girls were dancing again, Hazel's music jars clinking softly through the wood. I'm not ready, she said. You don't have time, Cal replied gently. She didn't answer. But this time, when she turned to leave, she whispered, Thank you for loving them the way I never got to. Cal watched her disappear into the trees, then turned back to the cabin. Inside, the girls waited, still laughing, still hoping, still unaware that the past they'd once escaped was now riding the rails back toward them. And yet, for the first time, Cal didn't feel helpless. He felt ready. The next morning, Cal found the violet again, pressed between the pages of Little Women, delicate and weightless, just like the note Evelyn had once left in its spine, for the day they know where they belong. That day, it seemed, had come. The girls were at the river skipping stones. Cal walked the trail up the ridge alone. No coat, no reason to sneak. She was there, sitting on a fallen log, ankles, crossed hands clasped tight in her lap. She didn't turn when he approached, but he could see she'd been crying. Her hair had come loose. A wisp danced across her cheek. I figured you'd find me eventually, she said softly. I didn't come for answers, he replied. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were gray like the sky before snow. Then why are you here? Because they deserve the truth. And so do you. She gave a hollow laugh. I stopped deserving anything the moment I left them on that train. Cal sat beside her, not too close. You didn't leave them, he said. You chose to let them live. She turned sharply. That's a nice way of justifying cowardice. He didn't flinch. What happened? Evelyn stared into the trees, as if the past were hiding somewhere among the shadows. I was supposed to marry the son of a French ambassador. It was arranged prestige family unity headlines the board of the Delacour Trust would approve of. You didn't love him? I didn't know him, she said simply. And by the time they found out I was pregnant by someone else, I'd already lost everything except the girls. She took a breath. They offered money to make it go away. Then lawyers. Then threats. They said if I didn't comply, they'd have me declared unfit. That they'd take the babies and raise them as Delacours, with nannies and tutors, And no memory of me?" She shook her head. "So I disappeared. I worked under a different name, took odd jobs, rented basements, kept moving. I taught them how to survive in small spaces, how to look like less than they are." Her voice broke. "I told them fairy tales so they wouldn't notice the eviction notices on the door." Cal was silent for a long time. "They don't resent you," he finally said. "They should. They don't." She blinked fast, then asked, "Are they happy?" "They're more than happy," he said. "They're alive. They're thriving. Because of you. Because you gave them just enough to believe in people again." Evelyn turned to him, face softening. "And because of you." Cal shrugged. "I just kept them warm and fed." "No," she said, voice trembling. "You gave them safety, structure, a father. Something I never could." That evening, Cal brought Evelyn back to the edge of the clearing. The girls were sitting on the tree platform braiding each other's hair, sharing a peanut butter sandwich in quarters. Rosie spotted them first. She didn't shout, didn't run. She simply stood, brushing off her skirt, and waited. Lila followed, then June, then Hazel, small and wide-eyed. Evelyn froze. "What do I say?" Cal looked at her. "Start with their names," Rosie Evelyn said, her voice thin. The girl's lips parted just a little. "Juniper." June's eyes shimmered. "Liliana." Lila's fingers tightened in her hem. "And Hazel." The youngest ran first, straight into her mother's arms. Then came the others, surrounding her, touching her sleeves, her hair, her hands, as if to see if she was real. Evelyn dropped to her knees, sobbing, wrapping them close. "I missed everything," she whispered. "No," Rosie said gently. "You gave us the part that mattered." Later that night, Evelyn sat by the fire with all 4 girls tangled beside her. Cal stayed in the kitchen, letting them speak in low, gentle tones, only they could understand. He'd never seen Evelyn so still, or the girls so whole. He turned to leave them be when Evelyn called out softly, "Will you sit with us?" He paused. "Are you sure they talk about you like a myth?" she said. "I'd like to know the man who turned a cabin into a sanctuary." He sat. The girls leaned against, both of them, now 2 on each side. Hazel placed Cal's hand on her head like a blessing. Evelyn watched. Then quietly she said, "You're not a replacement. You're the answer I never knew to pray for." The next day, Evelyn and Cal walked together to town. They entered the sheriff's office side by side. Evelyn signed the affidavit without trembling. She formally named Cal as the children's legal guardian. "Will that stop the lawyers?" she asked Sheriff Sutter. "It'll give them something to lose in court," he replied. "But more importantly, it tells the state what the girls already know, who their father really is." Cal didn't speak. He was too busy watching Evelyn stand a little taller for the first time. When they returned, Hazel handed Evelyn a picture she'd drawn: a small house with 5 windows, 4 lanterns glowing inside. "But there are 5, Evelyn said. "No," Hazel smiled. "You're the sky." Evelyn clutched the paper to her chest. That night, Evelyn sat outside with Cal. "I want to stay," she said, "but only if it's not too late." Cal didn't answer right away. He looked up at the stars, then at the porch light still glowing warmly over their heads. He reached for her hand. "It's exactly the right time." It began with a song. Hazel had taken to humming again, soft, slow melodies that didn't quite have a tune, but held a strange kind of logic, as if her fingers and lips remembered something her mind hadn't yet named. Cal noticed it first during breakfast. She tapped her spoon against the edge of her bowl in a rhythm too precise to be accidental. Lila noticed next, humming along absent-mindedly as she folded napkins into swans. But it was June who paused mid-step, eyes narrowing. "That's not just a song," she murmured. "That's code." Rosie lifted her head. What do you mean? June grabbed a pencil and paper and began to jot down Hazel's rhythms. Short tap. Long tap. 2 short taps. Pause. She's repeating it, June said. It's a pattern. Hazel blinked at her, then smiled. It was Mama's lullaby. She used to tap it on our backs when we couldn't sleep. Cal looked at Evelyn, who stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. That wasn't a lullaby, she said slowly. It was a cipher. They gathered that evening around the fireplace, Evelyn unfolding a faded leather-bound book from the cedar chest she'd brought down from the ridge. Inside were notes, journal entries, music bars penciled in delicate handwriting. It was my father's, she explained. Before he passed, he taught me how to write encrypted melodies maps hidden in music. It was something only the family knew. And she stopped, voice trembling. I passed it to Hazel without realizing it had survived. She flipped to a page where a song was scribbled in a minor key, each note circled or underlined with faint numbers. Rosie leaned in. That's the lullaby. Evelyn nodded. Cal furrowed his brow. You hid something. She exhaled. Before I disappeared, I set up a fund, something that wasn't controlled by the Delacour Trust. I diverted it into an account under a false name and left breadcrumbs inside these ciphered songs, just in case the girls ever needed it. Rosie looked stunned. You mean money? No, Evelyn said. I mean freedom, legal independence, funds for education, protection, a way for you to never have to go back to that world unless you choose to. June whispered. It's a treasure map. Hazel beamed. I knew it was magic. The decoding began like a game. Each measure of music revealed coordinates, initials, clues, embedded in verse and timing. The girls took turns interpreting, guided by Evelyn's fading memories and Rosie's precise mind. Within 2 days, they uncovered what they needed: a ledger key, a storage unit number, and a bank certificate housed in a safety deposit box in Jackson Hole under the name Eleanor Hale, Evelyn's old alias. Rachel Kerrigan drove them to town. She insisted on coming. If this ends in a courtroom brawl, she said, you'll need more than cinnamon cookies and charm. The bank manager, skeptical at first, reviewed the documentation and nearly dropped his pen when the safe deposit box contents matched every digit. Inside were legal guardianship papers, notarized letters, and an official statement relinquishing all Delacour trustee claims on the girls signed years ago by Evelyn and a pro bono civil liberties lawyer from New Jersey. Beneath it all was a bank card, prepaid, untouched. Amount $421.90. Cal stared at it like it might catch fire. Evelyn only said, "It was never for me." That evening the cabin was quiet with awe. They didn't celebrate. Not yet. Instead, they sat around the fire with mugs of cocoa staring into the flames. "What are we supposed to do with that much money?" Lila asked, frowning. Evelyn looked at Cal. He took a slow breath. "Whatever you do," he said, "make sure it's something that makes someone else's life warmer." Hazel nodded solemnly, as if swearing an oath. 2 weeks later, the tree platform was replaced by something bigger. The girls called it the 4 Lanterns Project. They used part of the fund to convert the broken barn into a warm, wood-paneled center with books, food shelves, and sleeping bunks open every winter to anyone in Snowpine, with no heat, no home, no hope, no questions asked. June kept a visitor's log. Lila sewed blankets. Rosie taught reading classes. Hazel played the jars she now tuned like a xylophone. Evelyn stood at the door each evening with a pot of soup. And Cal. He built the bench by the hearth and carved a message into the wood. Home is not the place that keeps you. It's the place that lets you grow. One morning, Cal found Hazel curled in his favorite chair, staring at the old book of cipher songs. "What you reading?" She looked up and grinned. I think I'm gonna write a new map, he chuckled. Oh yeah, where will it lead? She tapped her heart. Here, the first snow of December came early that year, light, quiet, and full of grace. Snow pine turned white overnight. Roofs shimmered beneath the morning sun, fences softened, and chimneys exhaled steam like old men whispering secrets. In the center of it all stood the barn. Once broken, forgotten, sinking into itself, now reborn. Painted slate blue with white trim, the new four-lantern center opened its doors on the first Sunday of Advent. There was no grand ribbon cutting, no reporters or brass bands. Just a hand-lettered sign. Come in. You're home. The name came from Hazel, because we were the four little lights that kept each other warm, she'd explained. And now, they were ready to keep others warm, too. That morning, Cal stood outside the new front door, bundled in a coat Rosie had repaired, and boots he'd owned since before the avalanche. He could hardly believe what they had built. Not just the structure, but the spirit inside it. Rosie and June were arranging books on the shelves, donations from neighbors, strangers, even the town librarian, who hadn't smiled in 15 years. Lila was laying out hand-stitched scarves and socks she'd made in her quiet hour. Hazel was tuning her glass jars again, each filled to the perfect level, each emitting a note like a soft bell. And Evelyn. She stood at the long counter in the shared kitchen, ladling soup into ceramic bowls. The smell of rosemary and potatoes filled the space like comfort itself. The first guest came just after noon, an elderly man with a limp and frostbitten fingers. His eyes were tired but kind. He didn't say much, just nodded, and took the soup sitting by the wood stove as if he hadn't sat down in years. Then came a young couple with a toddler wrapped in a sweatshirt too thin for December. Then a woman who'd been sleeping in her car. Then another. And another. By sunset, the center was full, not crowded, but held like a pair of open arms wide enough for everyone. Cal stood by the door, watching it all. The barn that once collapsed now breathed with life. That evening, the family gathered by the hearth. Not just Cal, Evelyn, and the girls, but the people they had touched, Rachel Kerrigan, who brought cider and sat in the corner pretending not to cry. Sheriff Sutter, who came by in uniform and stayed out of it. And a dozen strangers who already felt like neighbors. Hazel stood in front of the fire holding her jars and a wooden spoon. The room quieted. She tapped gently 4 notes, then paused. Then played again, each tone warm and soft, rising like mist in a hymn. June joined her with a tambourine. Lila added a low hum. Rosie closed her eyes and began to sing. It wasn't a song they'd practiced. It wasn't a song anyone recognized. It was a song that had waited to be born from the ashes of fear, from stitched sleeves and shared bread and windows that never locked. A song about a home that wasn't earned, but given. And when it ended, no one clapped. They just sat there in stillness, the kind that didn't need applause. Later, when the guests had been tucked in and the soup pot scrubbed clean, Evelyn and Cal stepped out onto the porch. The sky was awash with stars. The cabin lights flickered in the distance. Snow fell like whispers. She slipped her hand into his. "You built all this." He shook his head. "We built it." Evelyn turned to him. "I never thought love could look like this." He smiled. "That's the thing about love. It doesn't always arrive wearing a suit or flowers. Sometimes it comes with tools and soup and 4 small lanterns and handmade hats." She laughed, a sound that had been missing from the ridge for far too long. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. "Only that I didn't find you all sooner." They stood there a while longer, quiet, content. Inside, Hazel placed 4 candles on the windowsill. "Why just 4?" Dawn asked. "Because the 5th one," Hazel said, looking outside, is already shining in the sky. Later that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Cal wandered back into the center, just to look, just to be near it. He stopped in front of the bench by the hearth, the one he'd carved himself. He ran his fingers over the words. Home is not the place that keeps you. It's the place that lets you grow. And he smiled slow full, because for the first time in a long, long while, he wasn't lost. Spring returned to Snowpine with a gentleness it hadn't shown in years. The trees wore their first green, the rivers thawed into mirrors, and the wind no longer carried sorrow. The Four-Lantern Center, once a dream scribbled on napkins, and blueprints, now buzzed daily with laughter music and the comforting rhythm of kindness. But on one quiet April morning, a letter arrived that brought it all back to stillness. It was addressed not to Cal or Evelyn or even the girls. It was addressed simply to the one who stayed. Rosie found it first left on the front bench, sealed in wax the color of ash. Inside, on crisp linen paper, was a short message, written in elegant cursive. I once gave them a name to keep them hidden, but they are no longer shadows. They are light. If they ever wish it, the name is theirs again. But so is the choice to leave it behind. Dion. Evelyn stood quietly in the doorway as Rosie read it aloud. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were dry. Hazel looked up at her. What does that mean? Evelyn knelt to meet their gaze. It means, you don't owe the past anything you don't want to carry. That night, Cal built a fire in the clearing behind the barn. No occasion, no ceremony. Just a gathering of people who had come to mean home to one another. The girls sat cross-legged on a patchwork quilt. Rachel brought warm cider. Sheriff Sutter dozed in a folding chair with a flannel blanket over his knees. Evelyn leaned against Cal's shoulder, fingers curled loosely into his. Do you think we should choose a name? June asked. Only if it feels like yours, Evelyn said. They thought for a long time. Rosie was the first to speak. I want Bennett, she said, her voice clear. June nodded. Me too. Same, Lila said. Hazel tilted her head. Can I be Hazel Violet Bennett? Everyone laughed. Evelyn blinked fast, then smiled through the tears. Then it's yours, Cal whispered. Every letter of it. 2 weeks later, they stood in the courthouse. There were no objections, no press, no drama, just paperwork signatures, a solemn judge with kind eyes, and a moment when Cal looked at all 4 girls and realized he hadn't saved them. They had saved him. When it was done, the judge asked, Would you like to say anything? Rosie stepped forward holding a folded sheet of paper. Her voice shook a little, but she spoke anyway. We were born Delacour. That name kept us safe once. But now, we are Bennett. Because that name means kindness. It means warmth. It means someone stayed even when he didn't have to. That name didn't find us. We chose it. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Back in Snowpine, the porch light never turned off again, not even in summer. It became a symbol of sorts, that no one would ever be left in the dark, if this family could help it. They added a small plaque to the barn. This home is dedicated to every child who ever thought they were too late to be loved. The community started calling them the Bennett girls. The girls didn't correct them. One summer evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Evelyn and Cal sat by the window, watching the girls teach music to a new group of visitors. I never thought we'd get here, she said softly. He nodded. I thought I'd already lived the most important part of my life. You hadn't. No, he said. I was just getting ready for it. She smiled, leaned her head on his shoulder. So what now? Now, he said, glancing out at Rosie gently correcting chords, Lila helping a shy boy with a stitch, June leading a reading circle, and Hazel always. Hazel playing her notes from jars. Now we live, he said. Together. On the first anniversary of 4 Lanterns, they threw a celebration. Modest, heartfelt. Hazel performed a new song, one she had written herself. She called it, "The Name She Left Behind." The melody was simple, slow and full of space like a lullaby, and a goodbye braided into one. Rosie read a poem. June sang backup harmonies. Lila played violin on 3 strings. No one said the name Delacour out loud, but somehow everyone there understood what it meant to leave something behind and choose something better. As dusk fell, Evelyn stood near the tree line and lit a small lantern of her own. It glowed gold in her hands, fragile but unwavering. Cal came to stand beside her. "You never told me why you chose to call it 4 Lanterns," he said. She looked at the girls, laughing in the twilight. "I didn't choose it," she said. "They did." He nodded. And just before they turned back toward the firelight and laughter, she whispered, "But they were always 5. They just didn't know it yet. And maybe that's the quiet miracle we all hope for. To be chosen, to be loved, and to find, even after all, we've lost a place that still waits for us with the porch light on." If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. It always warms our hearts to see how far kindness can travel. And if you'd like to be here for the next story, just hit that subscribe button. Quietly, gently. We'll be right here when you come back. Thank you truly for spending this time with us. Until next time, stay warm, stay kind, and never stop believing in second chances.